Happy NaNoWriMo, first of all, for anyone who's participating. I've talked about openings before on my channel. One of my earlier videos when I started my channel was about opening lines and the different kinds of opening lines. So I will link that below. And then I also had done a video, I think it was with Lynn, did a writing swap, talked about our opening chapters. So I thought I would just kind of make an updated discussion, although I do think that a lot of what I say will kind of be a repeat from that. I think those videos are still really great discussions, so you guys can check that out if you want. So how do you set up a good hook for the rest of your novel? And always when it comes to these craft discussions, none of what I say is prescriptive. These are just kind of what I have noticed from opening chapters that I think are really effective, obviously informed by my own writing style and how I like to approach opening chapters, and also from what I just kind of like pick up from literary agents, what I see them talking about whenever they're talking about submissions that stand out to them. But again, everything is dependent on your writing style, on your project, and the specific needs of your book. And I'm not someone who loves to have so many rigid writing formulas. It's not what I think is best in terms of craft advice or anything like that. Personally, I think that I break a fair amount of writing rules, or at least I choose not to follow some. But I do believe in the idea that if you are breaking writing rules, you have to do it for a reason. You have to know the rules before you break them. The first thing is the establishing shot. I do mean this in like a visual sense, but I also mean this as you want to give your reader a good sense of what the starting point of your story is, so that we can then understand how the world and these characters are going to progress and change throughout the book. I kind of see this first chapter as establishing stasis, a sense of normalcy for this character and this world. I think that this is especially important if you're writing in some kind of secondary or speculative world that isn't entirely our world. When you are introducing your world, I think it's important to not introduce your world all at once and to not inundate your reader with a ton of information. The function of the first chapter, and I have done some beta reading where I see this inclination for writers to just want to dump all of their world building. And I think different readers have different barometers or different standards for what they think is too much info dumping. I think I'm a little bit more forgiving because I think that narrative summary can be done very well, but typically what is more engaging for a reader is to introduce your world in context and not just as a list of facts and information. So that's where kind of scene versus summary comes in. And typically when you're looking at an opening of a book, it is preferable to consider forgoing summary in favor of scene, just because that is how you are introducing and leading your reader into a world instead of making it feel like your reader is just reading an encyclopedia. But again, rules can be broken, and I have definitely broken this rule. I think if you are utilizing info dumping or narrative summary in a very intentional way, then that is a creative choice and you are valid in that choice, but you should know why you are doing that. In my sci-fi book that I wrote recently, Local Heavens, the opening chapter of Local Heavens starts on quite a bit of narrative summary. And the reason for that, the reason that I broke that rule, is because it is a retrospective narration style. So the narrator is narrating these events from some point in the future. There was a very intentional stylistic choice with starting with a little bit of narrative summary. So those are some kinds of considerations that you might want to make and what you want that establishing shot to be. Now, if you're writing contemporary or something that just takes place in our regular world, I still think that the establishing shot is important maybe less in the terms of let me introduce the world building, and more like giving your readers a sense of what your main character's life is like right now at the start of the book. Because presumably throughout the course of the book, your character's life and their circumstances are going to change. So you need to have a good sense of what their point A is before you take us to their point B. For example, if they are someone who feels very stuck in their life, in their career, in their school, or if something has happened to them prior to the start of the book and they're grappling with some kind of emotional event in their life, like you want to really fill out the details of their life and their circumstances. One thing about a weaker opening is when it feels like the character that you are being introduced to feels like one-dimensional. Your job is to make a reader convinced that this character is a real person, for the period of time that they're reading the story. Part of that is making sure that it feels like this character has lived a life prior to the start of this book, so that when you meet this character, you get the sense that you're meeting them at a very specific point in their life. So on the topic of character, the second important factor in a novel opening is establishing a sense of strong characterization. It's important for a reader to get to know your character as quickly as possible, to understand them, to sympathize with them, to bond the reader to the character. Again, characters are fully fleshed out human beings. That's what you want your reader to believe. And just to inject some of my own personal taste, I think one of the things that makes a character believably multifaceted, to me personally, some people might disagree, to me is when writers sort of withhold some information about the character, whether it's their backstory or some like key factor about them. Because I think that's what it's like to meet people in real life. If you are meeting someone, you're not gonna know everything about them within 20 minutes of meeting them. I mean, maybe, it depends under what circumstances you're meeting. Like if it's therapy or if whatever, maybe you're just trauma dumping on a first date or something, that's different. Most of the times when you're meeting someone, you're gonna start with just their sort of surface level traits, right? And it might take a little bit more time and a little bit more digging to get to like the heart and soul of a person or a character. So for me personally, as a reader and a writer, I don't need to know who a character is right away. What I am really looking for in a novel opening, and when I think about, the books that I have really enjoyed across genres, age categories, whatever, is when I get the sense that there's more to be learned about this character beyond just the first chapter. I love characters who feel like they have more brewing under the surface. And I think that that's true for, whether they're more stoic or whether they're more energetic. Many characters can have that quality to them. And speaking about personality, I think this is where the heart of the strong characterization comes in. So I think a really important question to ask yourself when you're writing that first chapter is, what really are like the defining traits of my main character? Who are they? How do they act? How do they speak? If you have a chapter where there are multiple characters in that first chapter, make sure that your characters aren't all speaking in the exact same way. I think a sign of really good characterization is when there's like multiple characters in a scene and you can tell who would be speaking even if there were no dialogue tags. That's not like a must-have for your first chapter, but just something to consider, because I think a lot of personality comes through in dialogue. Another way to really inject character into a scene is through the eyes of the perspective character. What kind of observations are they making? What voice do they have when they're observing things and when they're describing things? What opinions do they have about the people in the room? Is there a gap between how the perspective character versus the words that they're actually saying aloud to people? And the other thing about characterization is that I think that is so much uniqueness in a character's flaws. And so when you're introducing a character, you want to give a sense of not just what they're good at or what they like or their positive traits, but also like the more negative aspects about them. So when you're looking at your cast of characters, you really want to think about what are the qualities that define them, how do they move through this world, how do other people perceive them, how do they perceive themselves, and how can you inject all of those things into their narrative voice or into their dialogue. And the last thing that I want to quickly talk about is tension. So tension is going to be the driving force. Tension and wanting to know what happens next is usually going to be the thing that hooks someone. So one thing that I talk about in most all of my craft videos is internal and external conflict, how those two elements are at odds with each other in every single scene. So in an opening chapter, at least hint at what is the internal conflict of your main character. What is the motivation, the desire, the goal that they're grappling with? And the external conflict is the plot and the entire external world. What are the forces that are at play that are stopping your character from obtaining that goal, desire, motivation? Other important factors when you're thinking about tension in your opening chapter is, does the chapter end with some kind of lingering question or mystery? And this is an element that will help propel you into the next chapter. When I think about the opening chapters that I really like and the ways that I like to approach my opening chapters, there's something unsettling. You are being led into a new room in a very big house. You're being shown the room and there is a door across the room, not the one that you came in through, but a new door across the room that has been left ajar. So as a writer, what you want to do is put your reader into the shoes of that person who has just walked into this room and is peering over and trying to see through the door that has been left ajar. And they can kind of see something, but they want to walk towards it and they want to open that door and walk into the next room. Different stories are going to require different structures. So hopefully that analogy is helpful because that is kind of a mindset that I have whenever I'm writing, not just my opening chapter, but all my chapters, but especially the opening chapter. So yeah, those are just my thoughts on opening chapters. But everyone likes different things out of their openings. Happy NaNoWriMo for anyone who is participating. And that's it. Hope all your writing projects are going well. I will talk to you guys in the next video.